Greetings to everyone joining us around the world, and welcome to the March 2017 Computer Society Learning Series webinar. Today's topic is on the Computer Society Leadership Nominations. This webinar will walk you through the nomination process as it is more than just submitting your resume. The webinar will also include tips on so you can enhance your resume and help you stand out with the nominating committee. Today's webinar will be presented by the 2016 Computer Society President, Roger Fuji. Before I introduce Roger, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, and we will be emailing out to all attendees the slides and the recording after the webinar by the end of the week. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box you see on your screen. If we don't have time to answer all of the questions, there is a log of the questions submitted with your email used to register for this webinar, and we will reach out to you via email with the answer to your question. Just a little bit about Roger before we get started. Roger is a senior industry executive, and as I mentioned, he was the 2016 Computer Society president, so he is currently serving as the past president on the executive committee. Roger has long been involved with the Computer Society, having served as a press operations committee chair, as a publication special committee member, and a guest editor for Software Magazine. He has also served as the conference program chair, was a VP on the Standards Board, the 1210 IEEE Standard Working Group Chair, and the U.S. Chair for the ISO IEC International Standards. Roger is president of Fuji Systems, specializing in executive services. As a Northrop Grumman VP, he managed a $1 billion division developing F-22 and F-35 communication systems. He's lectured at UCLA and Sacramento State University. Plus, he served on the National Academy of Sciences Committee for the Space Shuttle. He is an IEEE Fellow, CS Golden Core member, and a 2010 CIE Executive of the Year. Roger has a BS and MS in Electrical Engineering from the University of California, Berkeley, and studied business management at Harvard, UCLA, and Darden. He is a contributing author for 2 books and has presented numerous papers. And with that, the floor is yours. Roger?
Thank you, Scott. Scott, can you bring up the slides?
Oh, sure, yes.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I apologize for yesterday. I was the technical problem, so you can blame me. Computer Society had done everything correctly. The error was on my side. Today I want to talk to you about a very important activity that we have within the Computer Society, and that is selecting the slate of candidates that will go on to the 2017 election ballot. We have several positions and the Board of Governors members that will be on the slate, and I want to take you through what the requirements are for filling out your nomination form for those of you that are interested in any of these positions. And as Scott said, this is an activity that is more than just submitting your resume. There are very specific requirements for each of these positions, and as the chair of the Nomination and Appointment Committee, there are 5 of us who are part of this committee, and we review all of the applications. And we then make a recommendation to the Board of Governors of the Computer Society as to who the candidates will be on the slate of that goes before the members. Now, the board can change our selection of the candidates on the slate. Generally, the board accepts the recommendations of the Nominations and Appointment Committee. The objective that we are seeking is to make sure that the best candidates are being presented to our members for the vote. And what I want to do today is kind of help you, if you are interested in applying for any one of these leadership positions, to fill out your nomination form in a way that will be most effective for you to be first selected by the Nominations Appointment Committee as a potential candidate. And of course, it's always up to the voters as to who they would want to select. I think the most important thing that I want to see on this slide is that we, as part of the committee, we rate your submission based upon your understanding of the Computer Society activities. Because obviously, when you are serving in a leadership position, you need to make decisions regarding many of our publications, conferences, our governance rules, issues about standards, and your ability to understand and appreciate the background behind all of the activities of the Computer Society are essential to become an effective leader within the Computer Society. So next slide, Scott. Okay. This is verbatim what comes out of the requirements for the Computer Society president-elect. So this year we'll be selecting the president-elect for 2018. That person becomes president in 2019. And also we are electing 2 vice presidents, the first vice president and the second vice president. The requirements are the same for all 3 positions, obviously, because there's a succession list here of in case that the current president is unavailable, then the succession goes to president-elect, then to first vice president, and then to second vice president. And as you can see here, I think what's most obvious to everybody is the technical capability that you're going to present yourself as commanding. But the technical excellence is more than in your specialty. It has to deal with the specialties that are part of the Computer Society. So this is what you need to think through as you express your capabilities to the potential voters. So it's excellence in all areas of computing and standards and publications, conferences, and so forth. Strategic thinking is vitally important in these leadership positions because as president, I can tell you one of my main duties was to be cognizant of what direction we needed to go in terms of our new products and services. So you need to have strategic planning, strategic thinking in your background. You need to be able to think about the big picture as well as dive into the details because, of course, you're driving the largest society within IEEE. We have over 60,000 members, and so it's important that you have that big picture capability. Obviously, there are many things that go on during the execution of any of these strategies, and this deals with operations of the Computer Society. We have over 80-some-odd employees that are staff who support us in all of these different areas, and part of your job as a leader is to help the staff, the leadership staff, oversee what's going on in the operations and also to assist when necessary to make critical decisions in the operations side. You also have to have a very good business acumen. You will be looking at financial statements and trying to understand and comprehend the trends of what those financial statements are telling you and what decisions you will have to make going forward in the year. You have to have the ability to work with people to get things done. There are many different styles of people that are involved, so again, your ability to work with all different types of people with different backgrounds is essential. Obviously, conflicts do arise, and you have to be able to navigate successfully through that. And the last thing there is part of your job as a leader is to recruit the future leaders of the Computer Society. So you need to reach out to those who show the capability of taking on greater leadership positions and encouraging them, as well as giving them the opportunity to learn about the Computer Society and have an opportunity to get some of that experience underneath their belt so that they can put it on their resume. So these are very important criteria, and they often don't show up when people write their nominations and appointment application form. So I want you to keep these things in mind because this is what we'll be looking for from the committee as to who we'll select. Next page. Our next slide. Okay, this is the Board of Governors. We have 21 Board of Governors members, in addition to the President, Vice Presidents, also part of the board, as well as a few others. But we will be selecting 7 new board members each year. So 1/3 of our board, from the standpoint of the members who vote for the board, will change each year. Now, we will select probably 11 candidates, and the voters then will vote for 7. And so the top 7 vote getters then become selected as the new board members for the next 3 years. Let me step back for a second and just say that for the president-elect, the first vice president and second vice president, those are just 1-year term. The first and second vice president are 1-year terms. The president is a 1-year term, but they serve a total of 3 years, 1 year as president-elect, the year as they are president, and that's their term, and the 3rd year is past president, like myself. So the board members serve 3 years as a term on the board. Again, board members have to have somewhat the same capabilities and knowledge of the president and vice president in terms of knowing the various aspects of the Computer Society, because all things go before the Board of Governors for approval. So the president cannot unilaterally make a decision without getting board approval. So the board has to vote, and those people who sit on the board therefore have to have some of the same capabilities as the president and the vice presidents. All of the programs that are going on within the Computer Society are reviewed by the Board of Governors, and so you need to be able to have an understanding of all of those things or be able to comprehend them. And also, one of the key functions of the board is to provide strategic planning, to know what direction that the Computer Society should be going in, working with the other board members and the leadership positions, the president and the vice presidents, to execute that strategy. Governance is a very important part of the function of the board. The board must oversee proper governance so that all the rules are followed such that we do not violate any of our fiduciary requirements in terms of compliance with proper policies and procedures, as well as fairness to all of our leaders and our members. So those are the positions. We have a position for the Computer Society president-elect, first vice president, second vice president. We generally will nominate at least 2 people for the slate for each of those positions. And then we have the Board of Governors, which there will be a selection of 7 people. We will offer a slate of 11 people to the board. The board will then approve or disapprove. They can add additional candidates. Those 11, or any 11 that finally comes out of the board approval, goes before our members. The top 7 vote getters become then the Board of Governors members. Next slide. Okay, so here are some tips. When we're asking you to demonstrate your knowledge of the diverse technical base of the Computer Society, you should think about your experience, your both academic or industry experience, and relate that to how that relates to publications, to standards, to conferences, to education and professional training, as well as membership and geographic activities. Now, you may not have all of those, but you're trying to cover as much of those as possible such that you can demonstrate to the voters that any issue that would come before you, either as a board member or as one of the leadership positions, you would have a pretty good understanding of what it means and be able to make the proper decisions. The Computer Society has a fairly large revenue base because we are the largest society. We have over $35 million in revenue. So you must be able to understand financial statements such that you can examine the financial statements of the Computer Society and make comments or make adjustments, or to be able to offer new approaches. So your ability to understand the finances of an organization the size of the Computer Society is essential. So again, something in your background that demonstrates you've had this experience is essential. Governance is very important because without the proper governance, then we can get into a lot of trouble from a nonprofit organizational standpoint. So we must ensure that we're fair and we are addressing the diversity issues properly such that we do not violate any of the fiduciary requirements that are placed upon our organization. And this can get to be fairly complex. Many of you saw in the last election changes to the IEEE Constitution. That's a governance issue. And many people I know that I talked to were confused about what those changes were all about. That's part of governance. Now, this is one area that most people don't have a lot of experience in, but wherever you can gain it through your academic experience by serving on committees or through industry experience is essential. So I, as Vice President at Northrop Grumman, I interface with the Northrop Grumman Board of Directors a lot. And so I got an understanding of what that board was looking for in terms of oversight of a large company like Northrop Grumman. So it's essential that wherever you can get this experience, it's essential because many of these issues get very, very complicated and get very complex, and your background in this will be essential to making the proper decision. Next slide. Okay. Strategic planning is essential. I mean, we cannot operate effectively by just thinking 1 year ahead. We are thinking 5 to 10 years ahead in terms of where we want to be as a society. Being the largest society, it does take us a while to make a change. We are a big ship, and it takes a lot of policy changes. It takes a lot of discussions with all of our different technical boards, our publications board, our standards board, our conference board, to get the message across as to the direction we want to be going in terms of the new direction that will make the Computer Society more successful and financially more viable going into the future. So this does not happen overnight. So again, first of all, you have to demonstrate strategic planning and to be able to create tactical execution plans such that we can then hand those execution plans to the various technical boards we have so that they can begin to absorb it and to begin to make the changes such that we move in the direction that we want to be changing in. So as an example, we made a major strategic decision to go all digital in our publications as opposed to print. This caused a shift in advertising, for example, so there was a financial impact to us because in print, many of our advertisers would then want to put their advertisement into the printed articles. When we went to digital, we noticed that dropped off because it wasn't quite as financially viable for many of the advertisers to advertise in digital. Even though it was the same object, it turned out that the way that the outside community wanted to use advertising was a little different. So again, all of these things come into play as part of the discussion about finances and about strategies and about execution. So when you put in your resume to try to explain your background in all these areas, like in publications, have you ever been an author, an editor, or a reviewer, or have you been involved in some of the financial aspects of the publications portions of our business? So just don't tell us I wrote these papers. If you can tell us a little bit about what you were involved in your paper or reviewing other people's paper or maybe being part of the computer magazine board that reviewed some of the financials, that looked at the strategic direction of computer magazine, those are the kind of things that would highlight the experience base that we're looking for in publication. Same thing with conferences. You have your program chair, your track chairs, your session and panel chairs. Maybe you're a presenter or a reviewer. And again, the same sort of thing. Don't just say that you participated in these conferences or you're associated with these conferences. You need to tell us what you were doing in it so that it gives us an idea of your background and your knowledge base. Same thing with standards. There's a lot of different activities in standards, and this is, again, one of the hallmarks of the Computer Society. In the international arena, we are known for our publications and our standards. Those are the first two things that come out when people talk about the Computer Society. Then conferences is obviously third. Next page. Okay, same thing here. I'm continuing with the list of things you want to think about. Have you been involved in any professional training, webinars, special webinars? For example, this is considered to be a webinar that we're doing today. Training materials. Were you involved in any special seminars that you gave to your local chapters, and so on and so forth? You should highlight those things because that kind of talks to the idea of providing a service to our members. Again, education. We develop many of the curricula along with HCM that major universities use. Also, we develop courseware. If you are involved in any of those or in any capacity, it would be good to mention that because that gives us an idea that you have an understanding of the educational activity in your background. The same thing with membership. Have you been involved with chapters, your local chapter? And just a brief discussion about this. And any special committees and task forces that you can volunteer for. I listed some of these. The Fellows Committee, that is, the Fellows Committee actually selects the fellows for the IEEE or the IEEE Computer Society. There's new initiatives that go on all the time, like cloud computing. Did you participate in the cloud computing initiative? The PSPB is the Publications Board. Did you in any way support any of the activities like the review of certain materials for the publications organization and strategic planning? Will you remember any of the awards committees? I've looked at some of these names that are on the list here, and I noticed that some of you are on our awards committee. We issue something on the order of 8 different major awards that we give out at our awards banquet, and we ask for volunteers to participate to help us select the award winners for our annual awards presentation. So many of you have participated in that, and it's good to mention that because that gives us an understanding of your ability to participate and work with a lot of different people to come up with a conclusion on important matters. And of course, governance. If you participate in any of the special committees that deal with governance, audit committees, obviously one of the ones that deals heavily with governance, as well as some of the other ones that I've listed here. So I'm giving you some ideas of how you can sprinkle in your resume these kinds of things. Just don't say you've written 200 papers. If you can tell us a little bit more about what was involved in those and what your role was, that gives us an understanding of your depth of experience with Computer Society activities. Next slide. Okay, accomplishments. You're going to be asked to cite your accomplishments. And many people will say, well, you know, I've published 200 papers. I've been the PhD leader for, 15 or 35 students and so on and so forth. I think, again, you want to tie all of your accomplishments to some of these key areas of how did that support some new thing in governance, or were you involved in strategic planning, some accomplishment that you did that has strategic planning as part of it, or anything that was involved in some of the technical activities of the Computer Society. So, for example, the last 2 years, the Computer Society had a special committee that was looking at conferences and how we can improve the overall financial return, as well as putting new blood into the format of our conferences. And that committee came up with some very good ideas on new approaches to running conferences, and also came up with a financial model for how to do cost and profit sharing in the conferences. So if you were part of that committee, that's a claim, that's an accomplishment you can cite, and you can cite both the financial as well as the governance and structural changes that were recommended out of that committee. So again, what you're, demonstrating here is your understanding of the Computer Society and that you've worked within the society on many different ways to move the society forward. And of course, anything you can identify that shows your financial acumen is very helpful, because again, in the board meetings, I would say that the financial discussions takes up at least, I would say, 35% of our time in one way or another. So again, having a financial understanding of various pieces of the business is essential and will be very, very helpful to the reviewers to see how qualified you are to serve in any of these leadership positions. Next slide. Your position statements. We read the position statements very carefully. What we're looking for is your understanding of what the future needs of the Computer Society are and what the outlook or the structure of Computer Society should be going out 10, 15 years, and what changes you would start to recommend to get there. So these are the kind of things you want to talk about in your position statement. The position statement, is not just some using some words just to kind of express overall generalities. The position statement should be your position on what you would do if you were president and what you would do as a member of the board. And you can cite those as part of your objectives. I think that would be very, very helpful. So the position statement is your unique position statement, and it will characterize you. So think about that and spend a little time on that. One of the things that I did this year was I increased the word count that you're allowed in each of these areas such that you weren't constrained to be able to cover many of these things by the word count. So I increased the word count. Now, the problem we have is if we have like 11 board members and we have, let's see, there'd be 3, and we have maybe a total of 6 candidates into the leadership position, you're talking about somewhere around the neighborhood of 17 to 18 resumes that go into our computer magazine and also the material we send out to our voters. Sometimes when that list gets too long and if the statements that we allow are getting too long, what we've discovered is that our voters get a little tired of reading. And what we don't want to have happen is the last person on that list never gets read because the voter has gotten tired of reading. So we're trying to keep a balance here, so that if you would understand why we're trying to limit the number of words, because again, we're trying to allow the voter to read the whole slate of candidates on the list. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is a wrap up, and then we'll take some questions here in a bit. Okay, so we want you to be able to show your knowledge and experience that you have with Computer Society such that you can demonstrate your capabilities as a leader for the Computer Society. And you should consider that the fact that you're selected to be on the slate to be balloted, that by itself is an honor, because you've gone through the most important filter and review process available. So if you get that far, I think it's a compliment to you, and of course we thank you for your participation. The next third bullet is the key thing. There is no magic formula to how you get elected. I do not know how the voters at any given moment in time will vote, but obviously you're trying to present yourself to the voter in the best possible way, such that if they read all of this information that you supplied, they will get the impression that you are highly qualified to take on whatever position you have applied for. And of course, if you are elected, you should view this as an honor, the ultimate honor you can have within the Computer Society, and that you can make a difference by how you perform in that leadership position. So this is more than just adding to your resume that you've been elected. It's now an opportunity for you to make a difference. And I think our last slide is just to remind you of the fact that these nominations are open, and that the deadline for sending your nominations in is the 24th of March. And if you have already submitted your nomination form, you may update it and resend a new one in. You have until the 24th to do that. So, again, I encourage everybody who's interested, even if you can't make it this year, maybe this will kind of help you think through in the future years when you want to participate and how you can provide the best foot forward such that you get selected on the slate that goes before our voters. So let me stop there and ask if there are any questions, and I guess there is one here. Are there any compensation and expense reimbursements for any of the positions? All of the positions are reimbursed from the standpoint of your travel expenses to the board meetings or any meeting that we send you to will be covered by the Computer Society. That's your airfare, your hotel expenses, your meal expenses, and also any incidental such as the taxi costs to and from the airport and so forth. So the Computer Society does cover and reimburse you for your actual expenses in sending you to the board meetings or any special meetings that are called by the Computer Society. So next question, are these positions good for graduate student members? Well, any person may apply, but obviously as a graduate student, you may not have the extent of experience that somebody in academia or someone that has been in industry for a while will be able to exhibit. So to that extent, you will be at a disadvantage. So while the answer to your question is yes, I think that your ability to cite the robustness on your resume will be limited until you get a little bit more experience underneath your belt. So there is no prohibition from anybody applying, but keep in mind that you want to be able to demonstrate that you have the background that we have been asking for as shown in this webinar. Okay, any other questions?
Roger, this is Scott. While we wait for some more questions to come in, would there be a good place for graduate student members to start in their process if they want to work their way up to a leader, sort of as a way as you did?
Yeah, that's a good question, Scott. So let me give you some advice. I'll tell you how I got started, and it was almost accidental. I wasn't thinking necessarily about the Computer Society, although I was a member, but you're not thinking about any of these leadership positions. But I first got called, and it was because of my industry experience in an area of developing critical software systems. There was a standards group that wanted to see if we can write a standard on that. And so I got called by the leader in the Computer Society because they had heard my name through industry as one of the people that had done this work. And also I had written some papers. And so I had been writing papers, and it's been going into various publications of various forms. So they knew of me from that. So I got roped into standards, and I became the chair of a standard that we're still working on today. I mean, multiple versions of it. But then, so I got known for that. But then I got called by people saying, hey, I see you're working on this standard. Would you mind being a reviewer for papers for this conference? And I said, sure. Being a young recent graduate, I said, I'll do that. That sounds kind of interesting. And, of course, I got papers on topics that I was not familiar with, so, of course, I then had to do some research. But then I think I did a good job because I got complimented for my review of those papers. And so the word started to spread, and I got called by other conferences, hey, would you mind being a reviewer for us, And then I got called by some of the publications and say, hey, we're hearing that you're reviewed for conferences. Would you mind being a reviewer for Software Magazine? And so it went on that way, and all of a sudden they asked me to be the guest editor for one of the months in Software Magazine. And then I got put on some special task force by the president of the Computer Society, and one of those was to lead the U.S. delegation on the international standards work that Scott talked about. So what it basically was, I just kept evolving, and part of that was you become known as somebody who, and I assume most people are like this, you're competent, you are thorough, and you do a good job in whatever they assign you to, and the word then spreads by word of mouth. Hey, Joe or Sarah does a great job, and you might want to consider her for your review committee. And your name gets then spread around, and pretty soon you get all these different committees that you're working on, and you get then that experience that then you can apply. And in my case, out of the blue, I got calls by staff within the Computer Society saying, hey, you've been working on all of these areas of publications, conferences. You should apply to the Board of Governors. And I said, oh, gee, I wasn't even thinking about that. And then they explained what the board was all about. And so I wrote my nominations thing, and I got voted in. So I served a 3-year term as board. And then, again, the leadership had seen me in my board actions, and so they said, we'd like you to apply to first vice president, which I did, and I got voted in as first vice president. I then got voted in as IEEE board, so that's our parents' board, which is the higher board. And then I came back and I became IEEE president, Computer Society president. So, my path wasn't predicted. Again, it was just taking on interesting assignments as I was asked to, and it led to one thing led to another, and I got involved on a lot of aspects of the Computer Society, and I enjoyed doing all those things. So that's how I got to where I got to. But again, you should take an opportunity at any of these levels to insert yourself. Offer your name, even if people don't approach, offer your name to review, be a reviewer for Computer Magazine or Software Magazine or any of the other 32 journals and magazines that we have. If you're new, it's generally the magazines you start with. You will elevate yourself eventually to the journals in publications, and then that will maybe take you to conferences, and it may then take you to webinars and so forth, and then who knows where that will lead you. So again, I would suggest that you volunteer wherever you can, and it will lead you to the right place. Any questions on that? Well, I see 2 names here I recognize for sure on the list. Housie Mueller. Housie's our first. He's our vice president of our technical activities board, and so he has taken on one of our major boards, reviewing all of the technical activities of the Computer Society. Welcome, Housie. And I see Edward Addy. Edward's the treasurer or secretary of our standards work. So Edward has been participating. I think he's also on a couple of the committees that are ongoing. I think, Edward, you're on the awards committee too, or maybe on one of the awards committees. So, again, these are people who have been participating, and some of the other people here, I may not recognize your name, but you obviously may be participating. Again, thank you for your efforts, and I hope that you're enjoying what you're doing, and it will lead you to potentially applying for one of these leadership positions. Anything else that we can address here?
I think that's all we have for questions, Roger. If you guys do have questions as they come up later in the day, Roger, can they email CS nominations at computer.org, and is that a sort of a better way to get a hold of you guys for questions?
It would be good to probably send their questions to CS nominations at computer.org. That way the whole committee will be able to get it, and we can, if there's a question, we can answer it. you know, if it's advice, I mean, we can give you only a certain amount of advice. Obviously, the details are going to be left to each individual applicant.
All right, great. So yeah, if you have any questions between now and next Friday, March 24th, you can email csnominations@computer.org. Thank you, Roger. That was a really great and really very informative presentation. I'm sure everyone listening will be able to take the information they heard and use it to help them as they fill out the nominating form. We will be emailing the slides in this recording out. We plan to have it to you tomorrow. We know that this is needed so you guys can finish up the nomination forms. Just a quick heads up, our next webinar will be on Women in Computing and Engineering. It will be on April 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's going to be presented by Jill Gostin, who is on the Board of Governors and also serves on the Membership in Geographic Activities Board as the chapter chair. Please be on the lookout for a registration link. We'll be emailing you, and it will be on the Learning Series webinar page on the computer.org website as soon as we have a final detailed description about the webinar. Once again, thanks for joining us today. We apologize about the issue yesterday, and we hope to see you at one of our webinars in the future. Thanks, and have a great day.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank